Hey gang. Today on Food for Thoughts, I've got quite a bit for you to think about. We're not covering game techniques or advanced mechanical skills. I want to talk about various aspects that may not fully relate to each other, but can have a bit of overlap in the ways they affect you as the player. So I want to talk to you about RNG, lag, and most importantly, mentality. And this is going to be me ranting a lot, so I should probably get started. RNG, the notorious trifecta of letters that giveth and taketh. And for those of you who never knew what it stood for, it's the quick way to reference random number generation. To oversimplify it, a computer is coming up with an unpredictable variable from a set of numbers, but usually a wide range of numbers, and depending on how high or low the value is will determine the effect or outcome of whatever action is being performed. Basically rolling a digital die. For Splatoon, RNG will commonly take form in the shape of a weapon shot spread. The game shows this with its crosshair that's always in front of your character. The Gal guns have always had an infamous RNG that pairs with their quick two-shot splat. The range blaster is another pretty wild ride in terms of RNG. You don't have nearly as quick of a fire rate, and quite a few different spots your blast can end up, and then combined with the fact that you can spark your blast depending on how your target gets hit, blasters can be pretty silly at times. And that's why with the introduction of main power-up affecting blaster shot accuracy, or anytime the Gal's got an accuracy buff during a patch, it's a pretty big deal being able to mitigate the RNG. Bombs also have a bit of RNG for their explosion patterns, and I think the people who feel that the most are Octo expansion speedrunners going for the Octoshot skip. It's a pretty nail-biting watch. Something that's not technically RNG, but still an unknown variable to you as a player, is where and how an enemy will move. It's the other half that pairs with your own mechanical aim that decides whether or not you can hit an enemy target. Sometimes it's luck and you didn't even know an enemy was hiding, you just happened to aim in the right spot and got lucky where you aimed. Admit it. Admit it. But what if I told you that the most RNG dependent weapons in the game are my Splatoon pride and joys, the roller class weapons? They have their own unique crosshair? That's honestly a generous name for whatever the heck these arrows are. They never give any feedback to your proximity of a target, nor do they give any indication of what the outcome of your shot spread will actually be. Like, what the heck are these patterns? And the lower towards the feet you aim at your target without just straight up hitting the ground, the more damage you can do. But again, there's no real reason to think that. That's just how it is. Another deceptive thing about rollers is the shape of the weapon. The lethal hitbox of a roller is honestly more akin to thinking of it like a shovel. The side edges of roller flicks are significantly weaker than being able to land a flick in the dead center. That's one reason vertical roller flicks are more lethal than horizontal ones, because there's significantly less of an x-axis, and it's the proximity of the y-axis that comes into play. Unfortunately, once again your crosshair is oh so unhelpful. Of course I won't be able to reach this with a horizontal flick, but will my vertical? The answer is yes. But there's no feedback on whether it would or wouldn't be possible, and there's also no indication of when you're at a range that can achieve a one-shot KO. You just kinda have to know these things. So I'll have all you roller haters know, it actually takes a lot more aim than you think. This message brought to you by Roller Gang. They see me rolling. And now we get to the most fun part, bouncing. From this point in the video on, I'm going to play a fun game, since I'm not using the actual game audio, but every time I bounce in these clips, I'm going to play this ridiculous sound effect, just to let you know. Splatoon has been out for 4 years, and to this day, I still haven't figured out the exact science for what determines when a roller will bounce. And if you do research online, you'll see lots of different ideas for why it does or doesn't occur, with honestly a lot of comments being a bit misinformed, and usually just guesses. Not that I can really blame them, because it's just not clear enough why it happens, and it just leaves people confused and hurting. We're hurting, Mr. Nogami. We're hurting. But some stuff I do know is that the game doesn't like it when two players share the exact same space at the exact same time, as well as the variation in the time of arrival for when a hitbox will connect with someone else's hurtbox. But that's honestly all I've got. And if it's not bad enough that you don't know when you'll bounce, you also have no idea or control over the direction your knockback will put you. Oh, did I forget to mention that rollers are the only weapons in the game that suffer from knockback and hit stun that they produce? After you are bounced to whatever unknown destination, you cannot act for a few frames, which might I say, a non-lethal attack to immovable paralysis on an enemy whose barrel is located conveniently next to your cranium perfectly true combos into your obliteration. It's beautiful. Fair and balanced at its finest, this is fine. That's honestly why it makes me sad, but it's completely understandable whenever I see rollers just get joked and trashed on, because on paper, they honestly don't have a lot going for them. Not the highest turf output, not the greatest range, terrible frame data, especially when compared next to sloshers, and a one-shot mechanic that isn't always reliable is, less than great at times. Who even needs a one-shot when you have a reliable and consistent two-shot that is faster and has more range than a roller one-shot? Wait. I didn't put that in my script. Message brought to you by Slosher Gang? Sorry. This isn't supposed to be all about me. But that roller rant is a struggle I deal with constantly. I can execute a play quote-unquote perfectly and still have it fail due to no fault of my own that can get me splatted and sometimes even cost me games. However, there are times when the planets align that just culminate into some amazing moments. And I think that honestly encapsulates the desire behind good RNG. There's such a unique thrill behind having things go your way that didn't have great odds. And it's just such a good feeling that keeps you coming back for more to try and make lightning strike twice. So moving on from RNG, let's go to everyone's favorite topic. The dark side of Nintendo that they like to sweep under the rug. Online lag. In a way, it's just another form of RNG because you never know who will have it, when it will strike, or even how it will affect the game. Sometimes it's Dragon Ball Z instant transmissions. Sometimes it's immortal squids that somehow found the lost defense up ability. Sometimes it's independent squids who don't need no ink. And sometimes it's receiving damage all at once, as it took the game a while to register that you've been bleeding out for a while now. You just never know. I'm not going to go into the finer details of why lag happens with poor connections and what the game tries to do with them, as people much smarter than I have way better and more detailed explanations that I will include down below to peruse at your leisure. But it's pretty interesting what's going on beneath the hood, so I highly recommend it. But we've all seen it. We all deal with it. It's honestly nothing that special. But what can we do about it? The sad answer is not much. And get good and deal with it. It's technically allowed in the fact that even with a poor connection, you are allowed to turn on the game and play it. And Nintendo has basically nothing in place to stop you. And some people can't help where they live and how much internet is provided for their area. For me personally, I live in the cornfields of the Midwest. So companies don't exactly feel like establishing a huge internet operation. And while it's usually adequate performance, there are times when it just doesn't want to work. And sometimes it can happen without any warning, even on days with nice weather. Why you gotta be like that? And even that's ideal performance compared to some places in the world. One of the popular desires a lot of competitive Splatoon players have is for Nintendo to start providing dedicated servers for online play. While a poor individual connection can still make its presence felt, even with dedicated servers, on average, it still helps alleviate a lot of the burden from someone's personal internet. Imagine Fortnite's 100-player lobbies with peer-to-peer connections. I can't even think of how much of a beautiful disaster that would be. Splatoon has set rules, science, and physics, and it's kind of a damper when lag seemingly lets people break those rules. And the only ones who can best fix that situation on such a huge scale is Nintendo themselves. But so far, it just seems like they won't? Nintendo Online gave a lot of promise as it was an internet service we would be paying for, and something of okay quality was getting funding to hopefully become better quality. Except it was basically the exact same okay quality. And the fact we now pay for something we had previously gotten free just feels not better, that's for sure. And gaming is without a doubt a privilege, and not a right, and it's truly an honor getting to experience such fun and amazing games like Splatoon. But knowing ways in which it could be improved yet probably never will is frankly a bit of a downer. Nintendo pays an awful lot of attention to what we as gamers want, and especially our Splatoon community, so I'm 99% sure they know we want dedicated servers. But I honestly couldn't say we'll ever get them. Just because things are working the way they are, and it's not like Nintendo absolutely needs to go out of their way to go that extra mile for us when things are just fine the way they are. It's one reason why playing Splatoon at a LAN is absolutely incredible. Everyone plays by the exact same Splatoon rules and conditions, and skill is pushed to the forefront. It just feels right. the way Splatoon is meant to be played. But that LAN experience is something that happens far too infrequently, as it's hard to get everything organized and all the people and teams together to make it happen all the time. So a majority of the time we spend playing Splatoon is in an imperfect form, a form that I still enjoy immensely. But the fact that I'm always missing out on something that's even greater most of the time still feels a bit sad, if I'm honest. Like it's always just barely out of reach, and I, as well as many others, would be willing to pay even more if it would help get us closer to dedicated servers, which would bring us closer to that ideal gaming. And I'm pretty sure this extends far beyond just the Splatoon scene. I'm sure many a Smasher and even a good portion of the Mario Maker Versus scene would be by the looks of what you currently got going on over there. So if you're listening, Nintendo, just help us help you. Mr. Nogami, we're hurting. So now that I've covered a lot of things that are honestly beyond your control as a player, with RNG and lag, let's talk about something you 100% have control over, your mentality. Mainly implying about how you decide to view the game, but I think it could just as easily apply to many other games or even aspects of life. As of recording this, I don't think it even needs to be said how important mental health and stability are. Your mind is so important in just helping you function. But there's a lot of things that can impact your mentality in both positive and negative ways. So another portion of your psyche I'd like to bring up is mental fortitude. I think most people could agree they perform better when they're in a good mindset. And when they're upset and tilted, they tend not to perform as well. So it's important to have a good mental fortitude, the ability to stay focused and in a good state of mind even when things start to go wrong. This would be not panicking and making poor decisions even if the enemy team has a pretty convincing lead over you, or letting laggy players take your focus off of what you need to do. The top players and teams frequently keep showing up in the finals because they're just that good. They can outplay any other team in spite of how questionable an internet connection they might be dealing with, because their skill is just that much better. They're able to keep their mind focused and play how they need to play in order to take that W. That adversity is the exact same for them as it is for anyone else. We have all dealt with it, and it's the ones who are better at dealing with it than others that are still winning regardless. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to get better at the game, you have to learn to overlook or play around lag, especially with such a global game like Splatoon. Trying to develop a better consistency is something I see mentioned quite a bit. How can I as a player get a better performance consistency? Well, I've got two very opposite ends of the spectrum takes on consistency in Splatoon. My more pessimistic outlook is that consistency is an illusion that doesn't necessarily exist. What I mean by that could be modeled through Splatoon's ranked solo games. There is such a wide range of experience levels that you never really know who or what you'll get on your team, and same for what you'll have to deal with on the opposing team. You might be fighting a sniper legend or a complete rookie. If you don't actually know them, they can look exactly the same. Or maybe it's a good player who is having an off day, or an amateur who may just be playing out of their mind. They do well this match, and then the very next, they're a little more tired, less focused, or weren't happy about the result of the last game. And now for this next game, it's getting to them, because maybe they only got +1, or lost a huge amount of points, or their rank bar broke, or maybe they're just hungry, who knows. The list of variables can go on and on, so it's important to realize what you can and cannot control. And since you can only control the elements of your own life, it's not worth getting bent out of shape about everything else that you couldn't do anything about. I developed an unofficial formula that honestly did wonders for my mindset. There's 8 players in a Splatoon match, so your one self makes up 1/8 of the players in the room. That's about 12.5%. You are only in control of about 12.5% of any one game of Splatoon. Now if you fancy yourself as good at the game, sure, go ahead and bump the number up a bit, and I'll even let you double it for being twice as good as everyone else. But the main point is, you cannot account for the actions of other people playing. So it's important that you try and do your part to the best of your ability for your team. But there is a very real possibility that no matter how well you do, it may not be enough, because someone else on your team may not have been able to do their part as well as they needed, or the enemy just did everything better. I always try to focus on myself and make sure I know I played as well as I could. If I made mistakes, then that's what I focus on. If I only made one mistake all game, then that one mistake is what I try to improve. Blaming other people may help me feel good, but at the end of the day, that doesn't do a single thing in actually helping me improve. That goes for both towards my teammates and my opponents. Sure, they may have been laggy, but the ways in which I approached those situations probably could have been better. I could have been safer or played a little cleaner. All of this is to say that the concept of consistency is really hard to preserve. My other take on consistency is certainly nothing special, but just to play the game and practice a lot, gain more experience and learn how to recognize mid-game scenarios so you can better handle them accordingly. Play with all kinds of experience levels. If you can't carry and conduct yourself well against less experienced players, there's no way you'll be able to do it against better players. And maybe you're not even as good as you think you are. Maybe you got out of one situation only because the enemy's aim wasn't good enough to hit you. And doing the same thing against a person with better aim, they'll stop you in your tracks. Getting data at different levels can show you whether your plan is as good as you think it is, or maybe not such a great option after all. Some people get so bent out of shape about only facing good teams, or completely staying away from what they consider a good team for their level. I believe it's important to get a good balance. You see if maybe certain team styles are better at poking holes in your defenses than others, or maybe some teams completely off-meta style is a weakness you never knew you had because you never faced anything like it before. The more data you have about yourself with your strengths and weaknesses, the better. There is always something to be gained from basically any type of practice if you're willing to look for it and appreciate it, regardless of how big or small a step it is, and I can't begin to emphasize enough how important that last part is in the long run. That's my more optimistic side of developing a consistency. In my mind, I'm willing to take on any opponent and stand a chance at winning. I've beaten some big names that I had no idea of at the time and should have lost to on paper, only to find out later they were a pretty big deal and well-respected player. And at the same time, I've lost to a lot of unknown players that I probably shouldn't have lost to, but they just outplayed me enough. And that range is kind of exciting for me because I never know what I'll be able to achieve as I strive towards the greatness. If you never underestimate your opponent, you'll never be surprised. And yet, that's a mental battle that some people kinda refuse to fight because they don't feel good enough and just admit defeat to someone in their mind. So of course they'll never be able to beat someone if they concede before the game has even begun. One thing that honestly irks me is when I'll play with people who aren't as confident, and if we happen to lose, just kinda go, oh, well they were really good, so we weren't really supposed to win anyway. Cause that is not at all where I place myself. I believe I always stand a chance to win, with everything I've accomplished and practiced. And that's just the kind of mentality I've developed for myself. My mental fortitude is something I'm still working on, as it lasts for quite a while, but eventually does wear down sometimes. But I try to keep it aligned with what I am and what I want. The constant chase between what I am in my mind to get to where I want to be in my mind is what makes up my grind. Making that growth a reality and constantly pushing that boundary beyond previous limits is fun to me. I could say that some other people also share that, but as it gets harder and harder to level up and be able to see the growth, it therefore becomes less fun. And that's where burnout can set in. Not being able to see your desired reward, and that gets to be too much for some people. And that's in almost any game or hobby that requires skill, not just Splatoon. But for me, even when I do start to see less growth, I attribute that to how much I have grown to get to where I am, compared to where I started, and I get to see, enjoy, and be proud of all of that growth all over again. That's how strong I've made my mental fortitude, by imbuing it with positivity, even if I do fall short. Sure, it may be kinda cheesy, but like I stated earlier, most people perform better with a positive mindset, so why wouldn't I try to give myself the state of mind that's going to make me do better? One last thing I want to mention is that it's important for you to find your own incentives, which are going to be a core part of your mentality. Not everyone enjoys the game for the same reasons, so it's going to be up to you to decide what it is that keeps you coming back. There isn't a single other person that can accurately and truly answer that question for you. So I believe that a base degree of fun is at the root of everyone's inspiration to keep playing. And when you're not enjoying yourself or having fun doing something, that's going to rot away various levels of your mentality. One thing that I think a lot of beginners and casuals do way better than top players is just have fun. I find praises and compliments towards the opposing team or plays that were made to be way more common in casual private battles and viewer streams, and it just promotes a much more enjoyable experience for everyone. Somewhere along the line, that just gets overridden by prideful egos and salt, and that's just not nearly as fun to be around. Splatoon is a game, and games are meant to be fun. It's okay to try to win seriously, but you have to be able to hold L's along with all the W's you want to take. Again, throwing blame around may make you feel better in that moment, but it's not going to do the same for those around you. There's a karma that can and will come back to hurt you in the long run. This is not a game you can play by yourself. If it gets to the point where you become that person nobody wants to play with, that's going to be a deep hole to try and get out of that you dug for yourself. In competitive games, someone has to lose, and sometimes that will be you. That's just fact. If you don't want it to be you, then use that as an inspiration to try harder next time. Gain new skills, new tactics. There's always going to be someone better, but there's no reason you can't become that person yourself. Hopefully at least some of this made sense, but confidence really is key. If you get your mind right, you'll play right, so maybe just a small perspective shift will get you going in the right direction. That's all for this episode. This has been The Gingerbread Man, and you can catch me in the next episode. Thanks for watching.
Swing your arms from side to side. Come on, it's time to go. Do the Mario just like that.